Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Motion Social Chronicles. And today is my absolute pleasure to have Bill Harper here with me, the founder of BrandBossHQ. Bill, thank you so much for joining me today.
I appreciate the offer. Thanks so much for having me.
It's absolutely my pleasure. So, you're the founder of BrandBossHQ. You help multi-million dollar businesses get their first billion aspirations with a strategic storytelling, right?
hmm
Awesome. Do you want to give us like more insights, dive deep into the brand and everything?
Yeah, most businesses have a really hard time knowing what story to tell in order to scale their business. And so what they do is they describe themselves. We're an advertising agency. We make candles, we make shoes, whatever. And the problem is that's not how we buy things. And so there's a disconnect between the way that companies feel comfortable talking about themselves, which is describing the products they make, right? And the way that the consumer needs to hear it in order to actually care. And we bridge the gap between those. So for companies that haven't done that or who haven't done it successfully or haven't done it successfully in a while, we help them figure out how to do that so that they can perform at their top level.
And is there like any particular industry or kind of business that you're working with?
So we're more of an umbrella strategy, kind of like Nike enjoys working with people to help give them progress. We work with businesses to get them unstuck. So the largest company that we worked with last year was 500 million, and the smallest group that we worked with was probably $1 million. And the common denominators between them all were that they were growth minded and that they were stuck on some level in terms of being able to grow their business, and they were open to doing something creatively and strategically different. If those three things are in place, then we have a good chance of helping that company to really scale.
And what would you say was the light bulb moment for you into building such a great offer and work with such clients, because working with, and I want to know like how hard is it working with these kind of clients? You mentioned like 500 million company business. How is it like the whole process? How difficult is it for you to get in touch in the first place with such big companies and then the whole sales cycle into closing them?
Well, so the getting in touch with them is really a function of visibility, right? So
Yeah.
we are appropriate, like every brand, for a certain subset of businesses. We're not appropriate for every business, right? The companies that are really moving forward, like Nike right now, doesn't need a group like ours.
Yeah.
They don't have to be Nike sized, but the point is businesses that are really humming along and they're growing at a good pace and they feel like they're operating at their full potential, those are groups that wouldn't need us. But the groups that we're talking about are ones who are actively looking for an answer. They are the frustrated CEOs, they are the frustrated CMOs or directors of marketing who are saying, I know that there's more here. Either we're in a decline or we've plateaued, and they're actively seeking somebody to give them a new way to think about solving their business problem. And that's where we're really the right kind of
Coming in.
solution. Because, and it was funny, I just got off the phone with somebody who was suffering the same thing, and she's like, I've got this great idea. We've hit, $5 million, but I can't get past 5 million. Like I don't know how to get to that next gear. And the reason is because there's a transition in there between the way you act under about 15 million and then the way you act over 15 to 20
After.
million. And
Yeah.
so that sort of bootstrap way that they sail and that they do messaging and the rest of it is very functional, and it's very bottom of the funnel. And in order to open up that bigger gate to growth, they have to consider a different way of talking to their client base. And so what we've had tremendous luck in over the last couple of years has been being online socially. When I got on TikTok about 18, 20 months ago, I was really surprised at how much response we received back. But I spoke to almost 500 businesses last year alone, and we helped more than 100 of them move their businesses forward over the last 20 months. These are companies that are looking for any kind of advantage they can get to make sense of the noise, right? Like the room has gotten messy and they don't know what to pick up first.
Yeah, Yeah, makes sense. And right now, how old is Brand Boss HQ?
So BrandBoss is just celebrating 2 years. So I've owned 5 advertising agencies. BrandBoss is our fifth. And this one is fairly new. So we've only been in business as a company for the last 2 years, and yet we've still managed to touch more than 150 businesses over that period of time.
Yeah, that's really impressive because I feel like the start is really difficult getting the like the couple of first clients, but like reaching to over 150 clients over the 2 years is really impressive. So having that in mind, what has been the Brand Boss HQ's best record month in terms of revenue up to now?
Let's see, I think our best record month was just under 500,000, and that was in the summer of last year. And I really see that as a huge indicator of where the concept is going, because if you take a look at the last 4 years in the States, it has been a difficult couple of years, especially the last two. And so for businesses to be reaching out at that rate, that's been fantastic. The other thing that's been really interesting about being on social media is that the outreach hasn't been limited to the United States. We've worked with groups on virtually every continent now, with the exception of, like Antarctica. But we've talked to groups in Africa, and we've talked to groups in the Middle East, and we've spoken with groups in Europe, and we've spoken to groups in Asia, and we've spoken to groups in Australia. And it's really interesting to work with these different organizations because the need is global, right? The need for businesses to figure out how to tell their story and how to move their company forward is global. And business leaders just don't have a rock solid, dependable thing that they can grab to. And my hope is that even in our small way, we can be giving the businesses a way to make sense out of this so that they can move their companies forward.
Mm-hmm. And making just over under $500,000 in monthly revenue, I want to know, like, what was the difference between that and the previous month? Was that like a revenue that we're actually looking for and calculated, or was it, like a significant change from the previous month and to the month that you made just under $500,000? Because, I want to know just like how you actually managed it, because, having a record-breaking month in terms of revenue comes obviously with a lot of good things, more revenue, more cash flow. But I feel like maybe if it's not calculated revenue, it could bring you a lot of maybe more, let's say maybe bad things, like more stress, more responsibilities, maybe having to hire more or something. So I just want to know how you actually handle the situation.
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and there's a couple different ways to think about it. The first is the efficiency of the company, because in order to hit those kinds of numbers and beyond, you need to be able to be efficient enough to do it. So mapping is incredibly important. But let me get to mapping in a second. The first part with respect to efficiency is every template for your presentations, for your proposals, for whatever, already needs to be done so that you're not having to reinvent them every time. Businesses lose a tremendous amount of time not having things templatized. Second is productizing your services. Rather than saying, let me build a proposal for you based on your need, we went the other way and said, here's what you can get at this rate. So if you buy this, you get this much. If you buy the next set, you get this much. If you buy the next set, you get this much. And each is progressively larger. Not every business can afford each one, and not every business knows what they actually need. So by doing this, it's like going to McDonald's, right? You can get a burger and fries, you can get a burger or fries and shake. So depending on what they need and how big their budget is and what they're trying to accomplish, we have an appropriate solution for them. This makes it much, much easier for people to make a decision. So really what we're talking about with efficiency this way is removing people's ability to say no, because what you're doing is you're making it easy to say yes, right? So I'm saying, okay, look, I'm not going to give you endless options. And that's one thing that a lot of businesses do. They go, we're going to build you a custom proposal. Well, That sounds lovely in theory, but the problem is that it takes a tremendous amount of time and effort to do that. You need to be able to get a proposal out in the next hour, right? And in order to do that, to move at the pace of business, you've got to have things templatized so that you can move quickly.
Move fast.
In order to do that, you have to know what the service offerings are. And that's what's referred to as productizing your template, productizing your service. So then next, of course, are the templates. So I know that for each thing we're going to do for people, I'm going to deliver this strategy format. That doesn't mean that the strategy is repeated. In fact, that's the exact opposite. The whole point of it is every business needs a unique solution. In order to give them a unique solution, I have to protect as much time as possible for our teams to be able to solve the problem. And therefore, I need them not to be thinking about how they're going to present it. So we know we're going to do these meetings in this order. We know that we're going to use these presentation decks in these orders to share the things that we're going to share. This way I keep everybody focused on the thing that's most important and most valuable to the client, which is solving their problem. And I think most businesses struggle with that because they think, well, the product is so great, like the rest of it doesn't matter. And that's not the case at all. No. People will buy the product that they like. They won't necessarily buy the best product. They'll buy the one that they understand the most. They'll buy the one that they like the most. And the one that they like and understand the most are the ones that are simplest and easiest to use. So the whole idea here is to make this so easy for them that they come away with a really great experience that says, hey, you understood my business, you understood my problem, you kept us moving in the right direction, you didn't use a one-size-fits-all solution, but it also didn't cost me a fortune to get there. When you can get those things balanced, you can grow, which leads me to the mapping thing that I mentioned before. In order for us to hit any number, we have to know exactly how many of something we have to sell. That's where productizing the services becomes so good. If I'm working in a product company, let's say that I'm selling, I don't know, pens, right? Then I know how many pens I have to sell by the end of the year to hit my goal. When you start working in a service company, that becomes more difficult because the services could be lots of things. It could go, I could be heavier on identity, or I could be heavier on, radio, or I could be heavier on whatever. So the whole idea here is to say, if we've productized it so that I know that I'm selling, a pen and then a phone and then a coffee cup, well, then I know I need 3 pens, 3 phones, and 3 coffee cups every month in order to hit my number. Now all of a sudden it becomes manageable. Did I sell 3 pens, 3 coffee cups, and 3 phones? No, what I sold was 1 phone, 6 coffee cups, and 12 pens. Oh, okay, well now I get to rejigger my map to say, how can I rework those numbers so that I'm focusing on 12 pens, 6 cups, 1 phone, or whatever, and that gets me to my end goal. Without that, hitting a goal is a guess. And you can't measure success on a company without having something that's actually measurable that way. So those are very simple pieces and just the foundation. There's a lot more that goes into it, but from a purely fundamental standpoint, that's the way to do it. I need this many of this thing at this price, which takes this much time, and then I can map out the success. How many, if I need 1,000 pens to sell, but I can only make 600 pens a year, then I know that I have a problem, because even if I have a map that says I need to sell 1,000 pens, I actually can't make 1,000 pens. You can't do any of that calculation unless you know exactly how that map is going to run.
Yeah, absolutely. So I totally agree with you. Like, obviously, as they say, what gets measured gets managed, and what gets managed can be totally fixed. And I just want to know, like, in terms of hitting the goals, how has BrandBossHQ done in the 2024, since we actually started a fresh new year now?
So 2024 was great because it was a building year, right? So BrandBoss was 2 years old. As we were elevating, of course, we're hiring. So there were a couple times during the year where we actually took our foot off the accelerator to allow the team to be able to catch up, right? So you grow, you hire, new people come in, they need to learn how to do their jobs, they need to know how to work with the rest of the team, they need to become familiar with the process, then they need to get good at it. You can't force that to happen. So just because I say, well, these are my goals, well, I'm going to burn out the team if I do that. So the whole idea is you bring them up, you let them establish. Then you bring them up, then you let them establish, and you bring them up. It's like
Establish.
going to the gym, right? You go to the gym and you can only lift a certain weight for a while, and then you just
But then you
keep at it, and then all of a sudden you break through the plateau and you grow, and then you hit another plateau, and you hold and you hold. So it's the exact same mentality. I think so many businesses now are in such a rush that they've forgotten that building a business is exactly like going to the gym. You are not going to do it overnight. I don't care how many people you see online that are like, 3 easy steps to being a billionaire. Nonsense. It doesn't exist. And the people that are doing that are full of it. Or they represent the 1% of the 1% who happen to be at the exact right place with the exact right idea at the exact right time, and fate stepped in and blew them up. But I mean, take a look at Amazon. Amazon didn't make a profit for 16 years.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, Amazon's a success story. Can you imagine what it must have been like to be knocking on
For 16
investor doors
years.
year after year after year going, listen, we didn't make any money last year, but we're moving towards profitability. That's a hard conversation to be having with people. So I think people need to get realistic again about what it takes to actually scale a business. I heard it said one time, and I really like it, that an overnight success story is about 10 years, right?
Yeah.
By the time you hear about the overnight success story, these people have been busy doing something for some time.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, speaking of hiring, I want to know like how big is BrandBoss right now in terms of employees?
Yeah, we're 20 right now.
20. And how hard or how difficult is it for you to actually go ahead, attract and retain like high quality team members?
So the fight for talent is real, and I think you'll hear a lot of people talk about it. And I think it's become harder in the wake of COVID, at least in the United States. There's so much demand for remote work, and that can be really detrimental to creating the kind of energy you need as a team. I don't know, I think the word culture has been beaten up to death. But when you talk about a team of people, and you imagine a soccer team or a football team that's, they have to gel. They have to know, hey, Sarah always, kicks left when she kicks, or you know what I mean? Like, you got to get to know the team. And you can't do that when all you have is a conversation inside a little square box 2 or 3 times a day. Like, there's just not enough touch there for that. So
Not enough
finding
emotion.
talent is hard because talent is hidden now. It's harder to see it, and it's harder to find it. And then it's harder to keep and retain it until you get them over the hump of this is a team that's worth being a part of. And it's an ongoing struggle. It is for every business. As you grow, needs change, the interests of the people on your team change, the direction of the company shifts in ways that sometimes leave people outside of something or sometimes require new people to come into the environment. So it's always an ongoing struggle. I think the clearer you can make what the business stands for, what the value of the person coming in will bring, and how they can be excited about being a part of the team, the better. I think there's nothing worse than, well, we just needed a button a seat, right? When you talk about a company that's 1,000 people right now, I just need you to sit here and sharpen pencils. That's all I need you to do.
Yeah.
Well, just sitting and sharpening pencils isn't any interest to anybody. But if instead you say, we have artists, and our artists are famous for drawing really fast, and the thing that they rely on is pencils, and pencils break, and you're the way that they're going to be able to hit their goal. Well, now all of a sudden, sharpening pencils
It feels
has
better.
meaning and value, and now I want to be a part of a team that's able to keep the fastest artist in the world drawing to their full potential. And now maybe I'm excited and proud about my job instead. And I think we've lost some of that in the remote world.
Yeah. I feel like the remote world has, pushed away that kind of emotion and building the whole company structure in-house. So, like the BrandBossHQ has been like post-pandemic in terms of as an agency, but in terms of pandemic, you were running another agency, right?
I was, yeah.
And how difficult was that for you in terms of a whole pandemic situation, in terms of hiring and even scaling the business?
It was incredibly difficult, and ultimately wound up in us deciding to move away from that business model because a couple of things happened all at once. Number one, no one could talk to each other. Okay, everybody was remote, no one could be together, so there was that issue. Number two, and this was the thing that I didn't expect, it was the first time in my career that I had businesses telling me they couldn't afford to market because they couldn't afford to grow. And what I found that they meant by that was that their operations and production had become so inhibited, they couldn't get product. If they were a company that manufactured in China, they couldn't get the boats through the port authority to be able to bring the goods into the United States. And they couldn't get people in China to be able to fill the boats on time. And they couldn't, so it was like, it was this compound problem. And then on top of that, everything became more expensive, right? And then you had the war in Ukraine, and then that affected areas that were there, and that had an impact on fuel prices, and that had an impact on time for delivery and manufacturing. So you had these really strange global influences that were coming into the marketing world. And so the traditional business model of, I'm a $500 million business or a $300 million business, and I'm trying to get to $1 billion, help us get there, suddenly became much more like, whoa, I don't have the people, I don't have the bandwidth, I can't get my product, and I don't know when it's going to change. And everybody just stopped. And so you had these very strange kind of maintenance accounts that you would work with, and it was very, very strange. So, at the same time, if you will remember, people were fired and then hired and then fired again, right? So the pandemic hit and companies went lean because they had no idea what to do. And so all of a sudden, this huge part of the workforce was unemployed. And they got really angry about that. Like yesterday I was a VP of something, and today I'm, sitting at home twiddling my thumbs. And then when they came back and they hired them all again, they hired them at such a high salary because they were like, we have to have people right now. And those people were angry, so they threw money at them. Well, that upset the balance. Now all of a sudden, the only players that could afford to hire people that were good talent were the biggest companies that had the most money. The small businesses were suddenly struck because those people were saying, well, look, I can get that much money over there if I just am patient enough and wait. So I'm not going to take your I'm not going to take your job. I'm going to wait for that other job. So it was like you had all of these dynamics that were happening all at once. And that led to the gig economy. And the gig economy was, hey, I don't want to ever be reliant on some big organization again. I'm going to go do something by myself. And this led to people saying, look, if I really look at it, I only need about $100,000 a year, or $80,000 a year, $150,000 a year. As an individual, that salary range is incredibly doable. So people got online and they were selling, white label skincare, or they were selling, shoes, or they were selling whatever that they were getting from somewhere else. And that allowed people to just kind of find their independence. And that bred an entire new group of entrepreneurs that was coming out of this need for a job that were like, I don't ever want to work for anybody again, so I'm going to work for myself. The irony of it is, of course, as those businesses grow, guess what they're going to become? The very thing that they said they wanted to leave. But nonetheless, they, at the moment, it was that sense of freedom and control and power over their situation that made them feel safe. And so all these people migrated over to this thing, and that changed the dynamic of the need for marketing. Now all of a sudden it isn't Nike and Adidas. Yeah, they're still marketing, but that's not where the growth of business was. The growth of business went downstream to small business. And when that happened, now all of a sudden those groups don't have those budgets. They need something much, much smaller.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, and you mentioning managing up to now maybe 5 agencies that you mentioned. So I want to know, what was you doing before actually starting your first entrepreneurial journey?
I worked for somebody else. And I think everybody, well, not everybody does, but I think it's smart too, because there's so much to learn. When you think of coming out of university or college and, you go and you get your first job, you really don't know anything. Right? You walk in and you're like, okay, I have an MBA, or okay, I know how to make shoes or whatever. And the person at the job's like, no, you don't. Come on, you have no experience yet. Like you might have book smarts about it, but you don't have an experience about it. And so you go to work with someone else in order to gain that experience and to really benefit from the knowledge that's around you, right? Those people that teach you how to do it right and the corrections that come when you do it wrong. And, I think businesses that are started and founded by people who are like 22 years old, that's great, but it's not sustainable really, because the quality of the product is as much as their experience level and they're able to get to. They're not benefiting from all of the wisdom that comes from having joined an organization where those people have knowledge. So I worked for a couple of different companies for a number of years, and when I was at about my, I guess 10-year mark was when I finally made the jump over to my first agency with my first partners. And, we grew it from 3 people up and sold it, and then moved on to the next one, and then moved on to the next one. And in between those, I went back as a consultant to agencies that were in existence to get a refresh, right? Like, I'd been away doing it my own way with my own perspective, and that's very limited. And then it was time to go back and see what I could learn again about what had changed with other groups and how they saw things.
And what would you say made you make that switch from obviously maybe not a very, very well-paying job, but a decent well-paying job into starting your own entrepreneurial journey? Or was it
Well,
something?
make no mistake that when you start a company, you're broke. I mean, let's not. So I think that there's a lot of misperception about what the beginning of the entrepreneurial journey is, and that's been fueled a lot by people who get online and say, look at me sitting on a private jet. I'm making millions of dollars. Probably not really.
Yeah.
And your first journey is hard. It's you work very hard to get a client, right? And then you get a client, but you're being underpaid, and the client is taking a chance on you, and you're taking a chance on them, and you don't really have a process yet because you haven't done it, or you're borrowing a process from wherever you worked last. And so you're kind of trying to figure it out, and usually that first year or two is kind of rocky, right? Like you're figuring out your own rhythm, you're figuring out how to do stuff, you're figuring out where you can get things to happen. But I think the decision to make the change always comes from discomfort or opportunity, right? I didn't enjoy working for somebody else because I didn't like the environments that I was in, or I liked parts of the environment, but I didn't like other parts. And I felt like I could create a better environment if I worked hard to do it. It's either that, or you see an opportunity and you say, that opportunity is really good and I can't find anybody here that's paying attention to it and I want to chase it. I find that that's really the 2 catalysts for people starting businesses.
And I want to know your perspective on being an entrepreneur. Do you think anyone can be, and do you think everyone should be? I just want to know your top traits of successful entrepreneurs for you.
Can you say that last bit again? I'm so sorry, you faded out and I didn't hear the whole sentence.
Yeah, no problem. So I want to know your opinion on if everyone should go ahead and be an entrepreneur or can be an entrepreneur, because with a lot of stress, responsibilities that comes with it. And so, I mean, do you think that anyone can manage it or is built for it? And just want to know what you're looking when you see the new and upcoming entrepreneurs in terms of let's say top 3 to 5 traits.
You have to be stupid. That's the truth of it. You have to be absolutely convinced that you can do it. And that's foolish for all of us. But if I look back, when I did it and when I see people doing it now, there's this ridiculous confidence that is well, I can do it. And you need that. You don't realize how hard it's going to be. And if you didn't have that ridiculous sense of self-confidence because you don't know how badly you're going to get hit, no one would do it. So going back to your first question, can anybody do it? Yes. under certain circumstances. If you're not the kind of person who likes, all of the great companies have a dynamic team, right? It was Steve Jobs and Tim Cook, right? It was Ray Kroc and his brother. Like, there's always a team because one person is the visionary, and that is that they have this picture in their head of what could be. And then the other person is operations, and they understand what it actually takes to get to the vision. And usually those two are very separate people, right? The person who is the visionary is like, oh, I get excited about this idea and I see opportunity everywhere. And then the operations person is like, what you're saying is ridiculous. Stop, you can't add more to the pie. Like, we have to do these things in this order. And as a team, that works very, very well. So you have to be very self-aware. Which of those things are you? And so a lot of times people that want to be entrepreneurs will say, well, I'm both. And I'm like, yeah, for the first year, maybe you're both. And then after that, the minute you hire somebody, you have to realize what role you're in. And the longer that you ignore or deny where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, the longer the company will suffer. So can anybody do it? Sure, if they understand their role and if they can find their counterpart. Should anybody do it? Probably not. There's a lot of people out there who think, I'll start a business and it'll be great. And what they really start is a hobby. They're actually a paid-for freelance consultant of some kind, right? This person does design really well. This person does accounting really well. This person, I don't know, works a conveyor belt really well. I don't know, whatever. And so what they do is they tell themselves that they're an entrepreneur, but they're not really an entrepreneur because they're not really growing a business. What they're doing is they're managing enough money that they're covering their need. But that's not really an entrepreneur. That's a freelancer or a consultant at the lower level. An entrepreneur is somebody who has a vision for growth and scale. An entrepreneur is somebody who sees an opportunity and says, I'm able to take this opportunity and turn it into something significant, and I can continue to grow it over time until it hits a level where either I can sell it or I can retire out of it or I can do whatever. And that's really different than just maintaining income, which is the other side of it.
The other side, yeah, of course. And what do you think would be maybe like 3 to 5 things that you wish you knew like before starting the whole entrepreneurial journey, like all the way from the first agency?
Yeah, the biggest thing is to simplify. I didn't realize how far we were stretching ourselves, and most business leaders don't. Most business leaders are either heavy operations or they're heavy visionary. If they're heavy visionary, almost always they're spread too thin. And the reason is because the visionary keeps coming in being excited about something new, because visionaries are not typically good on follow through and detail. And so lots and lots of businesses are started by visionary mentality. And what happens is that they go in and they say, I want to do this. Now I want to do that. Now I want to do this. Now I want to do that. And they run their people ragged all over the place. I did that when I was starting. I got excited about where we could go. I tried to stretch the company way before it was ready to do it. And as a result, we had high turnover, we had frustration, we had a lot of things because I could see the picture in my head, but we weren't ready to go paint that part of the picture in yet. So simplifying is one. Two, efficiency is the big piece. And that's all the processes and the templates and all the rest of the things that I was talking about earlier. And those all have to be governed by simplicity as well. So process and templates that are governed by simplicity, so to keep the business ratcheted down. And then really making a single promise. Businesses try to be too many things to too many people. I ask people this all the time. If you wanted a good steak, would you go to a buffet or would you go to a steak restaurant, right? And the answer, of course, is a steak restaurant. Now, the buffet may have steak, but you know it's not going to be very good because it's a buffet.
Not the specialty, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? So businesses are like, yeah, we do that, but we also do this, but we also do that, but we also do this. It's like, no. Lock down on one thing. And again, that leads back to the simplicity, right? So you've got simplicity of promise, simplicity of process, simplicity of pricing. and then everything else is an efficiency thing. And then the last one is visibility equals profitability. When you're in the kitchen making the sausage, then you're not out selling the sausage, right? And so what happens is businesses focus on their mousetrap, and they say, this is the greatest mousetrap in the world. My pen is better than everybody else's pen. And then you say, well, how are you telling the world about that? And they go, I show them my pen. And it's like, but the consumer has no idea how to evaluate one pen to another. Like, they just don't. They see a pen, they're like, I need a pen, whatever, it's a commodity product. This visibility with the one message, et cetera, and you can see how it all starts to layer on. It's this, I have to be able to say it simply in a way that means something to somebody, that's at a simple price and a simple process that gives them a simple but good experience. That's where you get the momentum.
And how hard do you think is to build simple processes and follow them? And also, I feel like another aspect in terms of when you sign your first couple of clients is having a great onboarding process and as quick as possible. So how hard was that for you to come to a point where like everything is simple and streamlined?
That's a great question. That's where experience comes in, right? You have to do it wrong enough times to know how to do it right. Now you might be handed something. Let's say that I worked for a business that did it really well. I might walk away and try to mirror what they did, but I won't understand why I'm doing it. Does that make sense? So like, I haven't maybe had the experience of doing it wrong to understand why that would be a negative impact on me. So this is where experience is really critical, is knowing this is, I only need to do the things that they need to feel good about the process. And that comes from experience.
Mm-hmm. And how hard was it for you to actually go, like, maybe, do you feel like maybe you should go through the process of burning maybe a few couple of clients in the beginning to get it right and hit big with a bigger and better clients?
I would love to say that it was just the first couple, but I continue to learn. We lost a client last year because we didn't manage their expectations properly, and it really hurt. It hurt me, it hurt the team personally, right? Because I've been doing this 35 years, and yet I still managed to miss a client expectation set. I didn't read the room properly, neither did the rest of the team. And so despite the fact that we did our best to try to manage that and to give them a good experience, and despite the fact that some of the things that we were doing for them were really positive, it didn't matter. We lost them emotionally. We lost their faith. And so, at that point, it didn't matter how many good numbers we had for them. We lost their ability to believe in us. And so, this happens, right? There are always going to be clients that see the world differently or that perceive the experience differently, etc. But it always hurts. So I don't think you ever stop learning. So burning a couple of clients, I wouldn't think about it that way, because they can jump online and give you terrible reviews, and they can do all kinds of things that are very visible and make it really hard for you as a business to get where you need to go. But I think instead you should be thinking about it as transparency and openness, right? So if I had a first client, I would say to them, we're trying this process out for the first time to see how this works. Or, I believe in being transparent. Let me tell you what it is that we're going to do. If there's anything that you feel is missing, or that you don't feel is important that we've added in, please tell me so that I can be aware of it. I would use those first clients as a research experiment to learn more about how our business could be doing it properly, if that makes sense. So yeah. I don't think, in answer to your question, I don't think you ever stop learning. I think you start, even with the best of intentions, not only is the process important, but doing the process is important. So I might say, these are the steps I'm going to go through, but what if I'm busy? What if I'm rushed? What if I miss something? Even with the best processes in place, I could make a mistake, or my team could make a mistake, and maybe they don't know it, and maybe we didn't see it, and maybe we didn't catch it, and then it's too late. So I don't think you ever stop learning. I think you just keep going.
Absolutely. No. And given your experience up to now from running multiple agencies, I want to know whether it's with Brand Boss HQ or any other agency, what has been the biggest, let's say, like, oh shit moment, whether that's on a good side or a bad side?
On the bad side, we created a campaign one time that got everybody fired. It was the right campaign, but the people that were approving it were very scared, and it was a very radical idea. And when we launched the idea, I mean, you think about companies that have launched radical ideas, and typically they work out pretty well because they're unique and novel and they get a lot of attention, and that's the kind of thing that we were going for. But the people who were in charge of making the decisions weren't familiar with that kind of like worry at the front end, and they panicked. And so what happened was, like, all of a sudden we had just announced it, the press had just seen it, and the next day, like, everybody started getting fired. Like, everybody freaked out. And the minute that they freaked out, there was no saving it, because they were so inexperienced about the process of doing something bold that the minute that they got negative feedback, they were like, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong, stop, stop, stop. And we couldn't unpanic them. Yeah, they just weren't used to it. So that was on the bad side. I think on the good side, the thing that is like the big aha, oh shit moment is like how valuable simplicity is and tenacity is. You just have to find a thing that you know works because people respond to it, and then you just have to refuse to fail. Like, it doesn't matter how many times we fail, we iterate, we learn, and then we get up again and we do it again. So many companies, they just quit. They're
So
like,
early.
it's like they have no stamina, or they refuse to pivot because they won't learn or whatever. But like, winning is about realizing that things are going to change. There was a famous typewriter company that just refused to believe in word processing. And they were like, we make the world's best typewriter. Well, yeah, but nobody was going to use a typewriter anymore. And they were like, well, that won't ever happen. And it's like, but it did happen. And for whatever reason, they just cocooned themselves in the belief that change would never hit them. When we recognized the interest in BrandBoss, we had been a large-scale agency for decades. And, this idea that people wanted something that was simpler and more digestible and was applicable to groups that were smaller and larger, but was bite-sized so that they could go through it one piece at a time. That was a very different way to look at that. And it was a big aha moment. Were we doing anything differently? No. We're still you think about it like making a hamburger, right? There's only one way to make a hamburger, right? You got a bun on top, a bun on the bottom, and the stuff in the middle. Like, that's how it has to go together. But now it was a question of, today we're just going to teach them how to cook the meat. And tomorrow we're just going to teach them how to put the pickles and the onions and the ketchup on, right? Like, then it will become a hamburger. And it was just a different way of thinking about the way that companies needed to get the information one step at a time. And the minute that we changed that, everything opened back up again. So it was just really interesting.
hmm And you also mentioned people just quit. And do you think that is, especially in the whole online agency space, business space, whether that's, marketing agencies, drop shipping, anything, do you think that's a reason because maybe other gurus glamorize it too much? They make it look too easy. For example, the whole agency space, I feel like it's very glamorized by other gurus because they make it super simple. You get your first client, you get a contractor, you pay him, and you get like passive income. But when you actually dive deep into it, you see that it's not that easy.
Yeah, I don't think that they understand what it really is that they're doing, right? Like, Gary Vaynerchuk is huge on the idea of going and reselling, right? This is a thing that he talks about frequently. It's like, you'll see him on videos out at yard sales picking up, I don't know, some kind of like Evel Knievel doll or whatever, right? And he's like, this thing, they just sold this to me for $3 and I get $50 for it online. But what you don't take into consideration is he knows that. which means that he's been doing it a long time. He doesn't have to sit at a yard sale for hours looking at every single piece, looking it up online, looking at the piece and saying, oh, the price difference is here. Like he's able to walk into that environment with the knowledge that he already has and say, that thing's valuable, that thing's valuable, that thing's valuable. Come on, we can hit 6 more before the end of the day. Yeah. And then when you go to sell it, someone has to buy it. So it might have been worth that at one time, but now you've got to get someone to buy it now. How many things have you seen online where, you know, you go to see something and there's 9 of them sitting there at that price and nobody's touching them, right? Yeah. Well, the reason why is because they're not worth that now. They were maybe worth that at one time, but they're not worth that now. No. And so now it's a question of, okay, well, you know, what does it really take to make money, and what is the model? So I think people run into it and they burn out. I think people run into it and they're like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Because you see the gurus online all the time and they're like, I did this dropship thing and look at my account. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm like, what BS planet are you living on? This is not, I mean, for a very few people who have figured it out, it's great. But I love the ones that are the t-shirt group. These are my favorite. Go get t-shirts. Well, here's what happens in the real world when you order t-shirts, right? You'll find a group and they'll say, we'll give you 50 t-shirts, whatever, for X dollars. And you're like, yeah, I can sell it for twice that. And then you get the t-shirt and the thing is sideways and it's peeling up on the side and you can't wash them more than 3 times or half the design is gone. Well, what do you think the people who buy those is going to say? They're going to go online and they're going to rip you apart on the reviews because it didn't work. Or, you know, it took more money than you expected to ship it or whatever. And so all of a sudden you thought you were making $6 per transaction, but it's more like $3.50. And so you're like, oh, well, I got to do twice the work now. And the truth of it is most people don't want to work. So they're just like, well, forget it. It's too hard. And the second the words too hard come out of your mouth, it's over. Because that too hard is like the universal white flag. Like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. It's too hard. You're never going to get anywhere if you're not willing to go through the uncomfortable part. And the uncomfortable part is not getting what you want. So that's where that grit and tenacity come from. You have to be willing to say, okay, what could I do to change this a little bit so that I do get what I want? And for most people, that's just not in their comfort zone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to know, like, because the whole B2B agency space is very fast evolving and always like updating it with trends and stuff. I want to know, like, your go-to resources for staying up to date with the market and with the trends. Is it like podcasts? Is it books?
You know what? Actually, I take a very different approach to this. I stay aware of trend, but I don't lean to trend. I lean to fundamentals because you can't break the fundamentals. You know, the reason that we focus so much on story and outreach and connection is because when you think about tech, it isn't supporting that. I don't know if you watched the Adobe presentation last year, but everybody was oohing and ahhing about the fact that AI was going to create, for example, all of the online digital banners. Well, the problem is, yes, it did the work, right? Like, it took approved images and approved headlines and it made a bunch of stuff. But that doesn't do anything for the thinking behind it. So, yeah, from an automation standpoint, great. But the problem is most businesses aren't going to say, hey, that's going to give us more time to think. What most businesses are going to do is say, hey, I don't need to spend the time thinking anymore. I can just push a button. And that's where it's all going to fall apart. So am I paying attention to trends? Sort of. Did you see the Nutter Butter thing? Were you aware of the cookie company that came out with the crazy kind of trippy social media post?
Social media, yeah.
Yeah, so it was just one thing, right? But Nutter Butter, big in the United States as a cookie manufacturer, came out and did this like really weird, like Halloween kind of trippy thing. And other companies tried to jump on the bandwagon, but it didn't make any sense because that was like Nutter Butter was off doing its own thing. And people were like, oh, hey, that worked for them. It'll work for us. And they tried to do the same thing. It was like, no, you have to put in your own thinking. Why were they doing it? What did they want it to come out of it? Nobody's even talking about Nutter Butter anymore. So it was a flash in the pan. It got attention, and then it died. And for all the other companies that were like, that must be the new trend, I'm on it, it did absolutely nothing for them. So not only did Nutter Butter not benefit long term, neither did any of the people that were trying to copy what they had done. So trend is a very dangerous thing to be enamored with.
Yeah. And like speaking of trends, like right now we have the whole AI stuff going on. I want to know, where do you stand on AI in terms of how it will impact businesses in the B2B space? How do you think it will impact BrandBoss? Or is BrandBoss already like utilizing AI?
We utilize AI, but the rule is you can use the tool, but you can't let the tool replace you. And what I mean by that is, if I'm trying to alphabetize something, if I need to look something up, if I need an initial idea spec'd out, okay, here's an idea that I have for a course that I want to do. Give me some thoughts on how we might structure it. Those are fundamental things. Then you go in and you tear that all apart because the foundational work was done, and then you put something together that actually works. So, from a comping standpoint, when we want to show what would a design look like, or what would a television commercial look like, or what would a print ad look like, AI is great. But AI can't think. So AI can solve tasks, but it doesn't know how to think about solving a problem in a creative way. An AI is not yet capable of saying, "Oh, this is funny because," like it can't do those interpretive jumps. And so, to show, an empty ketchup bottle and somebody going like this to get, somebody's attention to bring them more ketchup, like AI doesn't understand why that's funny or appropriate or relevant. Like it can't make that jump.
Actually,
It's like, businesses have to be really careful not to accidentally substitute the value of the thinking that they're doing with simply checking the box of having delivered a solution for it.
Makes sense. So I think that's a wrap from our side. I don't know if there is anything that you might feel we should have dived deep into or mentioned that we have not.
No, I thought that this was a great conversation, and I thank you so very much for the opportunity to do it. I've really enjoyed the time.
Awesome. I would really, really want to thank you for taking the time to join with me today. It was an absolute pleasure to speak with you. Very fun and insightful conversation. I really think that audience could benefit a lot of valuable things from out of this conversation. So once again, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.